I used to believe there were lines in a marriage you simply didn't cross lines side, never even be tempted by. I was wrong. This is my confession. I'm Felicia, 52 years old, and you've been married to Pierre for nearly 3 decades. We met when I was in college, and he was already establishing a career in accounting. We fell in love with the easy confidence of youth, got married, bought a comfortable house on AQ3, and settled into a life that everyone around us called stab and enviable. We never had children, though Ming was never right, and eventually we just made peace with the idea of a small household over the years. We slipped into top patterns so familiar that I could predict Peter's every move. Our life wasn't unhappy, no dramatic arguments, no harsh words, just a steady routine that the days into a mellow blur. As we approached our 30th anniversary, I started feeling a nagging sense of time slipping away. Peter, meanwhile, focused on his upcoming retirement plans, pattering out financial safety nets, maybe a winter home in a warmer climate. I treat sharing with him the restless nest string in me, how I worried we were getting old in spirit, not just in years, but he just nodded sympathetically and reminded me that soon we'd have all that time in the world for hobbies. Our trip, somehow, that soon never felt close now, and the hush and our age seem a talk again. That's when I volunteered to help with a local adult education program at the community center, partly distract myself, partly to feel useful again. It was an evening workshop series that offered short courses on everything from baking to creative writing. I assisted in a crafts class, something small. I thought wouldn't Dee and Mook from the center's coordinator asked if I could help in a new class about interiorizing basics. It sounded funny to always like decorating my house or rearing furniture or choosing paint colors. On the first evening, I arrived to find only a handful of participants. Instructor was Joseph, around 38, if I had to guess, newly moved to town. I introduced himself with a gentle smile, explaining that he'd spent years working as a freelance designer, but recently decided to share his experience through tying. I noticed how earnestly Has spoke to each of TD, making sure they felt comfort. When he approached me, he asked if I was interested in design or just volunteering. I admitted I was MLY volunteering, but found the tops intriguing. He lit up and said he was grateful for any extra set of hands. In that first session, we barely spoke. Beyond class, logistics, handing out pens, gathering feedback forms, but I was struck by how enthusiastic he was. He had a warmth and enthusiasm for color palettes and layout ideas that turned a mundane of subject into something alive. It reminded me of the passion I used to have in my own life decades back, before outings took over. As weeks passed, I found myself lingering after each class or chat with Joseph about design tips or out to stage a living space. Sometimes would walk out together too, the parking lot, discussing random subjects, old movies, a new cafe in town, music he liked. Our conversations left me energized, a feeling I hadn't associated with a everyday life, and a long time I told myself it was harmless, that I was simply enjoying good conversation, but a small voice inside hinted at something more, a subtle spark. I couldn't quite interrupt her in the meantime, noticed I came home a bit later on class nights, but H never PRI. He assumed I was dead, my volunteer role, and asked if I found it interesting. I gave him vegan words. Oh, it's a nice group, where Thai instructor is quite knowledgeable in, never named Joseph or mention how Isum stayed behind to talk design theories or personal anecdotes, the hush and our marriage deep end. We didn't have fights, but we also didn't share the deeper parts of for a day. Eventually, Joseph invited me to see a small renovation project he was doing at another volunteer's home, suggesting I might enjoy witnessing Ayal, life example of interior design in action. I hesitated, scanning for a valid excuse not to go, but the truth was Ayal, A stirring of excitement at the idea I accepted when I arrived at that house. I saw him rearranging furniture and picking color swatches with a level of detail that was oddly captivating. He explained each choice, occasionally asking for my input. I wasn't an expert here. He valued my opinions with as sincerity. That made me feel seen. After finishing, we ended up grabbing a quick sandwich of a nearby deli. I learned more about his background. He traveled widely, picking up dizzying inspiration from different cultures. He asked about my life, my marriage, whether he had kids or future plans. I answered cautiously, aware that discussing my deep restlessness might trivial too much. Still, the openness in his eyes encouraged me. I let slip the isms outstock that Peter and I have grown too comfortable. Joseph nodded sympathetically, offering a gentle remark about how it's never too late to chase for shack brains. I felt my cheeks warm. We tried to brush it off as nothing serious from there. The dynamic between you shifted. We started texting outside of class, random messages about interior dyeing ideas. A music playlist had commended a photo of a quirky thrift store lamp. I passed by each exchange, parked a little thrill. Even though when mostly kept it friendly, I found myself smelling at my phone, a gesture I hadn't done in years. It seemed I felt younger, more engaged them. I'd look at Peter, absent-mindedly flipping TV channels in living room, and guilt would twist in me gut. I pushed that feeling aside, telling myself it wasn't an affair, just a connection with someone who shared my renewed sense of curiosity. One night I ended up staying late at the community center because the Joseph wanted to finalize plans for a special workshop finale. We sifted through supply lists, rearranged seats, and empty hall, and eventually ended up side by side on the floor, drawing mock-up sketches of the setup we left. It felt like a school project. The conversation turned personal. He asked him more directly about me, my hopes, regrets, sweat. I wanted next in life. A lump rose on my throat. I knew that turning 60 soon felt like an unstoppable train that he worried I'd slip through my final decades without truly feeling a leave gained. Before I realized it, tears welled up. He gently placed a hand on Miss Holder, asking if I was okay. My heart pounded. Nobody had asked me that with such genuine concern. In so long I felt urged to lean into him, to find salicine. That brief contact, sensing them's intensity, I broke away, pretending I had to lock up the main door. But the next day he texted and meaning he hoped I felt better, that it means something to him that I'd shared a piece of my vulnerability. My pulse raised as I type. Here reply, a wave of gratitude and a flicker of something more. Over the next days, we found ourselves in more quiet corners at the end of a workshop or in a side room of the community center, continuing the conversation that veered from design into personal reflections. Each chat of back layers of me guarded, self-revealing a yearning I never admitted openly. Eventually, that desire manifested in a moment that changed everything. After a big workshop 6, Joseph suggested we celebrate with a coffee. We ended up at a small, softly lit cafe near the river long after it had emptied off customers. The barista was tidying up doubles, so we weren't exactly alone, be it felt privo. As we reminisced about how we'd pulled off the workshop, the talk drifted dark to our personal lives, to whether we believed in reinvention at our age. It made a light-hearted comment that maybe I was too old to dream of big changes. H looked at me with an earnest intensity. I don't think it's ever too late, he said quietly in that hush. We both recognized it. Electricity between us, my face flushed half, and fear half, and undeniable excitement. He reached for my hand. A cross table should have pulled back, reminded him and myself that I was married, that this was a boundary we couldn't cross and study. Let him hold at my breath, catching. It fell in that instant. I confessed how lonely I'd been, how I'd spent months, maybe years, running on a top. A lot. Tears pricked my eyes. He moved around the table, gently wiping a tear from my cheek. The K's overhead lights flow softly, and with each second we crossed lines of propriety. We shared our first kiss, tentative, bittersweet, knowing it was something we shouldn't want, but no longer able. Tell me. I left that cafe in turmoil, half elated, half in anguish over betraying Peter, and the life we built for a week. I avoided Joseph the first, the excuses about being busy cutting our conversation short, but that only made the longing more acutely. One night, I sat on the couch with Peter, flipping channels as usual, and felt tears rising. I had for real conversation, but words never came out. The next morning, I texted Joseph, "I can't go on like this. We need to talk." We met in a secluded park area somewhere neither office frequented, hoping not to bump into neighbors. I arrived first, heart pounding. One, he showed up, eyes full of concern. Her, I nearly broke down. I explained that I loved Peter in a familiar, decades-old way, but something in me was starving for the closeness and excitement Joseph proved. We both admitted we didn't want to hurt anyone yet. We'd already crossed that threshold. Eventually, we found ourselves as cling to each other. Confessions, a fling tumbling out that day, sealed our unspoken pact that we would continue in CC, at least until I decided what to do about my marriage. The following weeks are a reckless juggle of lies and stolliments. I told Peter I had extra duties at the center while Joseph and I met and nude off, the way spots are huddled in Hisker, talking quietly, kissing with AER that both thrilled and tearing each time, guilt gnawed at my conscience. I'd look at Peter, see how he assumed everything was normal, and feel tears building behind my eyes. Yet with Joseph, I rediscovered a spark I thought it lost forever, a sense that life could still be vibrant. I must have ground, careless, or maybe Peter grew suspicious on his own one Sunday morning. He confronted me, asking why I was always, why my phone buzzed at odd hours. My face went pale. I tried to concoct a believable lie, but I stumbled over details. He pressed me, dread feeling. His voice, "Is there someone else?" I crumpled, ears flowing as I admitted there was. I didn't mention the name or the depth of our intimacy, just that I'd grown close to a man. I volunteered with Peter, stared at me in betrayal and heartbreak, then stormed out saying I needed time to think. In the days after we spoke, only in short bursts, and lie about finances or logistics. The talk of marriage we once had fell to RF, tried to be supportive, telling me he'd step away if it would help me salvage my marriage, but I couldn't tear myself from him so abruptly. The reality was that I needed to see if the bond word could be something real. Yet I also felt the weight of 30 years with Peter. A history that once meant everything to me was excruciating as of now. On COP, between heartbreak and possibility, Peter hasn't definitively had things, but he stays elsewhere most nights. Joseph linger on the fringes of me life, offering solace UNC, if I can truly be with him, or if I'll try to mend things with my husband. I wonder daily if I should have forced a conversation with Peter years ago, but fourth hush grew so large that a single spark from someone else could burn my marriage to the ground. I wish I could report a neat resolution. Instead, I F myself in the aftermath of my choice, faced with the fragile truth that during emotional emptiness can push you into betraying the life you thought was stable. My name is Felicia, and at 52, I risked everything I built with Peter for a connection with Joseph, a man 15 years younger who reminded me that even a settled life can hide restless desires. Whether it was worth the from mainly, perhaps time will reveal. We can rebuild a new path alone or with own of them, or if the damage is too profound. Twax for now, I stand in the ruins of what was forging forward with a trembling hope that honesty might finally set me free.